Let's begin Masechtas Chagigah. We're only going to do the Mishnah. We're really going to start this Masechta on Sunday morning. Okay? We're going to start the Masechta on Sunday morning. Okay? But I just want to give a little Hakdama. Masechtas Chagigah is the last Masechta in Seder Moed, in the portion of one of the 6 books of the Mishnah known as the festivals. Chagigah means Chag, Yom Tov. What this really means is we're talking about a sacrifice. If you remember, a person has a mitzvah to come up to be Oila Regel, to make a pilgrimage 3 times a year: Pesach, Shavuos, and Sukkot. In coming up, there are a few things. One, we all know half the game is showing up. So first of all, you gotta show up. Riyah, you have to see Hashem. You have to see the Beis HaMikdash. You got to show up. Second,
and Hashem wants to see you.
And Hashem wants to see you. Number 2, not only do you got to show up and be in the game, but you have to bring a carbon riyah, a sacrifice of being seen, or a sacrifice of coming to see. Okay? So you got number 1, you got a carbon riyah. Second, every one of the pilgrimages must be with great joy, simcha. So you need to bring a carbon simcha, otherwise known as a shalmei simcha, a shalomim of joy. Third, so I've got a sacrifice for showing up called the Oilas Riyah. I've got a sacrifice of joy, meaning a shalmei simcha. And now I've got a third one. It's Yom Tov. It's Chagigah. I got to bring a carbon Chagigah. So I've got 3 kabbanas, except that may not be true. It's very possible that the carbon simcha, the shalmei simcha, and the Chagigah are one and the same. That's a machlokes rishonim. It's a little unclear working your way through, because I need to be with joy and I need to have extra meat for the Chagigah, for the Yom Tov. I can cover both with 2 stones. I could cover 2 things with one carbon. So we're either dealing with actually physically 3 kabbanas, 3 sacrifices, or maybe only 2 that are 3. Here's the next question. If I come up to the Beis HaMikdash, so I'm Riyah, but I don't bring a carbon riyah, I don't bring a sacrifice of seeing, have I fulfilled my obligation of coming up for the pilgrimage? In other words, is this 2 separate things? 1, I got to show up, and 2, I got to bring a carbon for showing up. Riyah, and to bring a carbon is riyah.
You can't show up with nothing.
Wait a second. Maybe yes, maybe no. So
you'll be over.
But will you be mekayim your mitzvah of showing up? There's a mitzvah by itself. It's actually about machlokes rishonim. It's about machlokes rishonim. Whether those 2 are tied together, it's not enough for you to show up. You got to show up plus bring the sacrifice of showing up. Or no, you could show up. That's a mitzvah. There's a separate mitzvah, its own mitzvah. It stands alone of Oilas Riyah.
It's like showing up to a wedding without a checkbook.
Right. So, okay, good point. But that's all of this is flowing through over here. So now, having said this, there's also the various laws of Tumah and Tahara, but we'll get into that later. So let's just start the Mishnah, okay? And we're going to probably repeat the Mishnah on Sunday, okay? We're going to be a little behind. The world's not going to come to what he called. We'll catch up. Hakol chayovim b'riyah. Everyone is chayiv to b'riyah. Look at Rashi. B'mitzvahs riyosei kol zechorcha. That all your men should show up, should be seen, or should go see. Shetzrichin Lisarois ba'azara beregel. You need to go and be seen in the courtyard beregel. Does everybody notice that Rashi doesn't mention the sacrifice? Right away, he said, all you got to do is show up. Nowhere does it say anything in this Rashi about actually bringing the carbon. From this Rashi, a simple reading of this Rashi is the mitzvah is to show up. There's a separate mitzvah of bringing a sacrifice. What I just said is, in fact, a great machlokes. It's a big machlokes. So, and like I said, is that really what Rashi's saying? Or no, it's in fact what it really means. You got to show up in the Azara and you got to bring a carbon. But Rashi just didn't say that. So I'm just telling you, it's all buried in these words right here. Hakol chayovim beria chutz, except for bicheresh, a deaf, and what that means. We're going to get into this big time. Shaita, somebody who lost his mind. The cotton and a cotton. What age is this cotton? He does, because remember, at a certain point, there's going to be a mitzvah chinuch, a mitzvah of teaching, which is on the father to make sure the child does. But do you have a chiv as a father to make sure the child does? At what age does that start? We'll get to that in a minute. The tumtum.
Rashi says it's also the mother.
And the mother, well, I didn't want to touch the mother just yet. Because that gets a little more, that's on a lumdisha basis, on a pilpule basis, that's a much larger question, which we don't have time for today. So let's leave that one alone, because that's a third rail question. The tumtum and the androgynous. Now, tumtum, we sort of know today. Multisexual or unknown sex. It's a they, not a he, not a he, not a she, a they. In their mind. It's actually that the sexual organs are covered over with a membrane and you can't see what they are. The androgynous is an androgynous. The noshim and women. The avodim she'enu mishucharim. And slaves that are not freed. A slave, an Evet Kanani, a Goyish slave that's not free, has a din like women, has to keep the mitzvahs like women. So if the women are not mechuyev, the Evet is not mechuyev. Why the women are not mechuyev is something we're going to have to tackle. Does that mean that they have no chiyuv of simcha? Does this mean they don't have to be oila regel, they don't have to do a pilgrimage, and they don't have to do simcha?
The husband has to be b'sameach.
But if that's true, then please tell me why they don't have a velus on Yom Tov. Because the only reason why we don't have a velus on Yom Tov is that say of the rabbim of Simcha is mabatel that say of the yochid of avelus. But if women don't have a mitzvah of Simcha, then they should have to sit avelus even on Yom Tov. This question will come up. We're going to have to deal with it. We're going to have to deal with it. From here, you have proof that there's something called not just simcha b'poil, physical joy, but there's also something called simcha b'leiv, joy in the heart. And in fact, that's as real as physical joy. But that's a question for another day. Hachigar, a lame person, v'asuma, a blind person, v'achayla, a sick person, v'hazokein, and an old person. Now, is zaken, what does it mean? Is the zaken chayla? If that's the case, you didn't have to mention zaken. He's already a chayla. So really, the zaken goes with the next words. Umi she'enu yachol la'alos beregel. Somebody who's incapable of climbing up the mountain and getting into the Azara, his legs are not up to it anymore. Who is a cotton? Kol she'enu yachol l'roichev al kaseifa shalavet. Any child that is not really capable of riding piggyback on his father's shoulders and then walking on his own up the mountain from Yerushalayim to the Harabayis. Any guy who cannot hold the hand of his father, that means he's really walking now. He's old enough to truly walk on his own and walk up the mountain, have the power to get up the mountain. It is not mechuyev in chinuch, in being taught to go to be oile regel. Shnema shalosh regolim. It's called the 3 regolim. We touch up regel as holiday, but regolim also means 3 legs, 3 feet. Yours and his. He's got to learn to stand on his own 2 feet. Beishamai Oimrim, the carbon, Haria, the Oilas Ria, the carbon that you have to bring when you show up for the pilgrimage sacrifice, Shtei Kesef, needs to be worth at least 2.
You see, the mission doesn't mention the carbon.
Now it does. Interesting. The Chagigah more, and the carbon Chagigah only 1. Now, is the carbon Chagigah, Daddy, a separate carbon, or is this part of the same carbon of the Shalmei Simcha? Not clear. So just like that's not clear, that's not clear. The lashon of the Mishnah is not very clear. Only with 1 kesef. This is where we're stopping. The sacrificial, the sacrifice you have to bring for seeing the oilas ria more kesef only has to be worth 1 kesef. The chagigah shtei kesef, and the chagigah has to be worth 2 kesef. It's actually double, which means if you think about it, Hill might be saying you need enough money for 2 kavanas, the Shalmei Simcha and the chagigah. So we don't know what's going on here because clearly, when it says Chagigah, that you got to bring Chagigah, it certainly also means you have to bring the Shalmei Simcha, because that's Min HaTorah. You have to bring the Shalmei Simcha. So all of this is buried in this Mishnah. We will repeat this Mishnah Sunday morning, and we will start the Masechta. There will be a couple of dafim behind.